Well, first of all, good to see everybody. Appreciate you coming out. I know it's a busy time of year with a lot going on here in town. And obviously we continue to get just fabulous fall weather, so it's great to be out there today, and appreciate you guys catching part of practice. It's good to be back in game week. We very much needed that bye for several reasons, but now that we're back in the routine and got that Tuesday practice under our belt, it feels good to be having that sense of urgency again to get ready for another game. It was a very physical first half of the season, and so that bye week really came at an opportune time for us. As many of you know, the Troy and UConn games, we had several injuries coming out of those two very physical games, so last week gave us a little bit of time to try to get some guys in better shape for the second half of the season. The number one thing we did from a coaching staff standpoint was really comb through those first 6 games, both in terms of numbers and video, doing a really thorough self-scout so that we're seeing our own tendencies, we're seeing what opponents are seeing out of us, and hopefully learning some things from that. And then taking some time to evaluate the entire roster. Who are the guys that are being productive here in the first half of the season? Who are some guys that maybe we're trying to redshirt but have 4 games that they can participate in? So that was another part of last week. And then in terms of getting out on the field, which we did Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, big emphasis on fundamentals. You know, that never stops. That's an ongoing process for us. A lot of game situation review, the things that might only pop up once or twice over the course of a season, and then a big emphasis on developing the younger players. So the last team period every day was a 3s or 2/3s team, letting those guys get some quality work. And then there's the whole sort of mental, emotional side that I think is important to sort of reflect on where you're at as a team. And we've had some conversations about that in team meetings and in leadership meetings. And one of the things that I've made very clear to our guys is while we are always striving to improve, and I believe there is still some capacity for this group to continue to get better here in the second half of the season, to a degree, you are who you are, right? And this is the 2025 team. These are the guys that we have. We've got different strengths and weaknesses like any other team in America. And the fact is that the last 4 games have been decided by a total of 11 points. So if you're a player in that locker room right now and you're expecting to just show up and win games by 28 points, it's probably not going to happen because it hasn't happened against teams in our conference and good group of 5 competition here the last 4 weeks. So in my mind, we have to prepare ourselves this week and the 5 following games for a lot of really, really tight 60-minute ball games against really good competition. And when you look at our league as a whole, I'm sure there were probably not a lot of people thinking that the standings might look like they do right now and that some teams that are pretty talented might have a loss or 2 already in the conference. But that's the way it is, right? And it's anybody's race here in the second half of the year. And I really believe that the teams that can come together and play well and play with a lot of spirit and a lot of togetherness and make the most of their opportunities, you know, the 2 that can do that are probably the 2 that are going to end up in Detroit. And you know, one of them that's playing pretty well right now happens to be Kent State, which, as you might recall, going into that game, I had an awful lot of respect for them despite what people may have thought about last year's Kent State team. Going back to the Eastern Michigan game real quick, I think the things that we did well there, first of all, we were able to contain one of the most explosive passing games in the conference this year, so I was pleased with what our defense was able to do that. Obviously, we got Roberson back, and while he was not completely healthy. It was certainly good to get him back in there, and we did throw it pretty well when they overloaded the box on us. Vic Snow obviously had a big game. That was the fourth time that we were able to score on a 2-minute drive this season, 3 times against Kent, and then a 4th time in that game. So I was real proud of the offense and how they executed down the field. We did not run the ball as well as I would have liked, and some of that is a credit to Eastern Michigan and just trying to make us one-dimensional. But even when teams are trying to make you one-dimensional, you still have to find ways to run it. And then we gave up more yards on the ground than I would have liked to have seen. We didn't get off the field at times on 3rd and some 4th downs on defense, so that was a little bit concerning. But our defense really did step up. You know, when we had the 1 turnover in the game and Eastern took over deep in our own territory, and we bowed up there and held them to a field goal, which was huge. And then we played well down the stretch on defense, which was good to see. Our specialists, Dylan Drennan and Jack Howes, continue to play very well for us. Our net punt was 56 yards, which I can't ever remember a day in my 2 years that we've done that well. And then Jack had the 50-yard field goal to tie the game before the dramatic overtime finish. So a lot of good stuff coming out of that game. And hopefully we can carry some of that momentum from that win through the bye and here as we travel to UMass. And, you know, I'll just say this about this team that we're going to play. You know, you guys, and this is your job to do this, you know, you tend to look at records and scores and things like that, and I get it. You know, what I look at is video, right? I look at personnel, I look at schematics, and again, reflecting back on Kent State, you know, a lot of people probably thought it was just coach speak when I was praising that team before and after our game. But again, I think that's a really good football team that's going to cause some havoc in our conference in the weeks to come. UMass has a lot of really good pieces to their football team, and when they click, they could play with anybody in our conference. The Western Michigan game was really tight. UMass comes out, drives down the field on them with ease, and appears to score a touchdown on an explosive run, only to find out that one of their receivers lined up illegally. They had 5 in the backfield. That play gets called back, puts them behind the chains, and then they end up settling for a field goal. That game was back and forth. They force a punt. They accidentally run into the kicker, into the punter, which generates a first down for Western and keeps a Western drive alive. There's a strip fumble that UMass gets. Really nice play. And now they've got an opportunity to go back down the field. So there was a chance for them to go up easily 6-0 in that game, and they missed a field goal. They had several explosive passes in that game against Western, and I believe right now Western Michigan's defense is right up there at the top of the conference. Their team's 3-0 and in first place. So my point is that UMass has got good players. They've got a good plan. They're clearly well coached and have an identity in all 3 phases of the game. I think like a lot of new staffs and rebuilding type teams, they're just a little bit inconsistent at times right now, and they've had a few self-inflicted wounds. But we watched several clips of them in our team meeting this morning and you know, pointed out to our team, like, you know, if they execute this well, this is a very, very dangerous football team, and that's what I believe that they are. I also think following a tough loss like the Kent State game, you're going to do naturally as a staff some soul-searching and perhaps come out of it with a little bit more aggressive mentality in some different ways, maybe make some potential changes. So we've got to be ready for some potential shifts in philosophy. But you know, we're going to go into this game anticipating seeing their very best and an aggressive mindset from them in all three phases. They've played three quarterbacks this year. All three have done some good things. Number one, Rose started the year. He played most of the Western Michigan game and played well. I think he can make all the throws. He's got good mobility. Number 8, Hairston, played last week against Kent. Also played a lot in their games against Power 4 opponents, against Iowa and Mizzou earlier in the year. He had 227 yards passing last week. He's got a strong arm, just seems to carry himself well. He's got good mobility. And then number 9, Grant, is perhaps the best athlete of the three. He's played a little bit over the course of the year, played a lot in the Bryant game, and seems like a guy who's got the ability to run it. Their wide receiving core, they were missing number 2, Gibson, last week, and there's a reason why this guy's got 3 times as many receptions as anybody else. I mean, he is a legit, impressive, big play receiver, and when he's in there, he seems to bring a lot of juice to their offense. So I don't think his injury against Western was a long-term one, so we'll assume that he's going to be back. He's got 36 catches. Number 12, Gray's got 14 catches. Number 7, McConaughey's got 13. 5, Kelly's made some impressive catches. Number 11, Downing. 0, Massey. All of those guys are productive, so they can play 5, 6 receivers very easily and count on those guys to make plays. Both tight ends are 6'6". Number 83, Atkins. I mentioned Dowling already because he's one of their leading receivers, and he's a very good passing threat as a tight end. But both of those guys are physical in the run game, and they have gotten the ball to both of those guys down the field. I like all of their running backs. 24, Griffin, appears to be, at least in recent weeks, a little bit banged up, but started the year very strong. Again, I don't see that as a long-term injury, so there's a good chance he'll be back. 26, Hood. 28, Price. They roll through there, and they all look very similar. They all look maybe 5'10", 200 pounds, physical runners, good vision, good change of direction, good burst. They've all had some explosive runs. They're kind of like Hanson brother type running backs. All three of them sort of look alike and sort of play alike. The O-line is a big, rugged group. They got a little nasty streak to them for sure. A well-coached group. Their O-line coach has been around and is well-respected. And, this is a group that likes to mix it up a little bit. So we're going to have to be very poised on our defensive front. I know they had a couple guys get banged up against Kent State, so they might be shuffling some guys around this week. Overall, it's going to be a lot of 11 and 12 personnel, zone schemes, gap schemes, some pin and pull schemes. They do a nice job with their screen game, whether that's with the wide receivers or the running backs. So we're going to need to match their physicality. We're going to need to tackle well in space. We're going to need to limit explosive plays, all the basic stuff that you talk about. And I will add that they are very aggressive on 4th down. In that Kent State game, while the game was still very much within reach for UMass, they went for it on some 4th downs, didn't get those, and then Kent was able to take advantage of some very good field position, but clearly these guys are not afraid to go for it on 4th down. Their head coach has a strong defensive background. He's part of the Rutgers, Minnesota coaching tree, which I have a lot of respect for. Very sound, very simple, but they fit things right on defense. It's a base 4-down, a 4-2-5 configuration, and often that 3-technique defensive tackle is into the boundary. They'll play a lot of shade nose, which can give your center some issues. They like to bring their edge pressures, so definitely some similarities, at least in their previous games, to what we've seen getting ready for Minnesota. Nice mix of 1 and 2 high coverages. They were playing a little bit more 2 high earlier in the year, a little bit more 1 high now. So we'll have to see how they evolve this week and how they look to attack us. Is it more pressure? Is it some of the things that other teams have done well against us? We'll have to see how that all plays out. I like their defensive tackles, 91 Davis, number 11 Randall. They appear to have good depth at DT because they play number 90 and number 54 a lot as well. They also roll guys through at the edge position. Their linebacker core, 44 Hins Peters, their leading tackler. Number 5 Martin's the other inside backer. And then this guy 0 Craig, he's sort of a big nickel. I think he's listed at about 210 pounds. He's athletic enough to play out in space and make tackles in space, but he's also a physical guy that can add himself onto the box. Corners have good length and run well. Safeties, 3 Bournes, I believe is his name's got 29 tackles. So this is a good unit, very sound unit that we're going up against. And from our end of things, what I'm looking to see coming out of this bye week from our offense is just the unit gelling and just getting into a rhythm and starting off fast. There's going to be situations where we're going to have to win one-on-ones in this coming game, and whether that's our center matching up on their nose guard or our ex-receiver on one of their corners, we need to go out there and execute and win those battles consistently. From a special team standpoint, I think they're very good, both in terms of the quality of their specialists, return people, but also you could tell that they put an emphasis on it. Their special teams coordinator came from Dartmouth, so it warmed my heart a little bit. I'm watching a bunch of Dartmouth clips earlier in the week, and for those of you that don't know, I was at Dartmouth in the mid-'90s, early in my coaching career. So, you know, seeing some clips of Dartmouth against Princeton or Brown or Columbia was bringing back some really good memories for me. I think there's a gentleman's agreement in the Ivy League that you still have to be a 3-man shield punt. But UMass will punt out of both a 2-man and a 3-man shield, and they are very, very multiple. They've got an Australian punter, which reminds me of my days in the SEC, where we typically saw Australians, and sometimes these guys are like 29, 30 years old. So this guy Keegan Andrews, he's probably as old as Margot Robbie. I'm assuming he knows who Mel Gibson and Russell Crowe are. Probably doesn't know who Olivia Newton-John is, but maybe I'll have an opportunity to talk to him about that before the game. But they are very, very multiple with their punt, and this guy can rugby punt. He's a lefty, so he can keep it to the left, but he can also bring the ball back across his body to the right. He's also a very effective angle punter. This has got to be the best group of punters I've ever seen in the MAC. And this guy is certainly right up there. Their kicker, Morris, is 6 of 8. He's got a long of 53. They use a different guy to kick off. They did try a surprise onside last week against Kent State, which I don't blame them. I mean, the space between Kent State's centers, you could have probably sailed the Bismarck through that space. So good for UMass. They gave it a shot. I would have too, but they're certainly capable of doing that. I like their returners. The one kick returner, number 7, has been out for a while. I don't know if he'll be back or not, but he looked extremely explosive, had a 57-yard return in the Bryant game. So this is a team that I think is as capable as any in our conference. And we're going to have to come out of this bye and play really well, and fully expecting a 60-minute game to get it done. So that's that. I'll open it up for questions.
If I wanted to check on a couple injured guys. I think I might be forgetting one that I wanted to ask about, but Deion Crawford.
Deion practiced today. Yeah, he's I don't know what percent he's at, 85%, but I expect him to play Saturday.
And Jake Tim and I think Alex Henniger came out of the
game. Yeah.
Right?
So I'm cautiously optimistic, maybe a little bit too optimistic at this point about both Tim and Henniger. I put them back on the 2 deep just because, I want to be really positive. But we'll see where they're at later in the week, and both just did some limited stuff today.
And Taquan, how close is he to being fully healthy, 100%?
Yeah, he practiced today, and I thought he looked okay. So hopefully every day he's going to get a little bit better. And but he knows he needs the reps this week. You know, we limited his action last week in an effort to get him healthy, limited him again a little bit on Sunday, and then he tried to basically do everything today.
How would you say your line's playing with the injuries? And then
Yeah.
UMass has a Marcus White or something that's getting a lot of sacks. So what kind of challenge is that for a line that's nicked up?
So overall, one of the pleasant surprises of this season has been how our offensive line has held up in pass protection. You know, the Minnesota game was tough. That was some really good defensive ends that we played against in that game. I think at least one of them will be a pretty high draft choice. But in these other games, we've really held up pretty well. And even when we've had to shuffle the lineup around here with some of the injuries in this most recent game, we've hung in there pretty well. So that's been encouraging. You know, going as far back as the spring, we weren't quite sure who our best five were going to be, and so we've moved some guys around and cross-trained our group to try to always get the best five out there on the field, and I think some of that has paid off for us. I also think that Henry Tabasny and Trevor Brock have been very solid at tackle. And probably even a little bit better than we would have expected at this point, because Trevor's been a guard pretty much his whole career. So overall, I would say that group is playing pretty well. And to your point, you know, if we can get back to our traditional starting five and keep guys in their normal positions, that will be even better. But until that happens, if we've got to mix and match, we will. James Carrington, who's a former walk-on that we put on scholarship, has really stepped up. He's done well at center. He could play guard for us too. And some of our younger guys, some of the freshmen that we redshirted last year, Tommy Barr, who's a true freshman that we're trying to redshirt this year, particularly on the inside, some of those guys have bright futures ahead of them. So, you know, we'll keep trying to bring them along.
Pete, you mentioned a little bit of this too, is, you know, going against a team that hasn't won a game yet this year. What are just the challenges that come with a team that has that mentality of backs against the wall, nothing to lose, knowing that they're, you know, looking to kind of create a spark at this point in the season? Yeah,
you know, we do what we do, and I know that probably seems like a very boring answer that you guys get from me all the time, but that's really when you talk about the foundation of our program and the culture of our program. You know, we don't vary too much, and you know, I think one of the reasons why we've won some close games here is, you know, we don't panic, right? And so we do what we do. You know, we obviously you're going to try to adjust your plan a little bit based on who you're playing. And I would fully expect that this is a team that's going to try to generate some early momentum, come out, you know, with some kind of explosive play that maybe they worked on all week to try to spark early in the game, or maybe it's a fake punt, or maybe it's a surprise onside kick. But the truth is, we work on that stuff every week, all right? And we're constantly talking about situational football. We're watching that stuff in our team meetings, right? When is it likely that somebody's going to call a fake field goal, and are we going to be ready for it if and when they call it? Why would they call it in this situation? So, and we do that stuff with all 113 guys on the roster. So you hope that over the course of the season that guys are continuing to learn the why and why we do what we do, and then you keep practicing some of those situations, and sometimes you don't get to every single one of those every week, but if and when you get a surprise onside kick, you know, hopefully those centers on the kickoff return team are not aligned as wide, right, as the two that UMass saw the other day, so that when they're coming out and thinking about it, they're saying, well, we don't have that this week. You know, so that's all part of our weekly preparation, whether you're playing UMass or Minnesota or anybody else.
How well do you think the team received that message or applied those lessons in your games against Kent State and Eastern Michigan? Because they came in without great records going into that.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see. You know, a lot of times when we have our leadership meetings, I try to do a lot of listening, and I'll throw different questions out and try to get the beat of the pulse on certain things with the team. You know, our last meeting was a little bit more of me giving a lecture, which I don't typically like to do, but I just thought it was appropriate, and I just gave them a lot of facts about this is where we're at. And you know, we all talked about some of the different teams that we've been on. And yeah, some of us have been fortunate to be on undefeated teams that have, you know, won by lopsided scores in multiple games and things like that. That's not always in the cards, right? Teams have different strengths and weaknesses, and you know, at a certain point in the season, while you're always striving to get better, you have to somewhat accept the reality of who you are and what you need to do to find a way to win. And that might be winning a game 24-21. Who knows? It might be winning a game 17-14. Who knows, right? So, but you got to find a way to win, and you got to do it as a team. And so that was a big part of my conversation to them. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's a lot of satisfaction that comes along with that, as long as you truly are maximizing your potential and embracing the current circumstances. And so what I'd like to see this team do is when there are different guys in the lineup, or a different unit is playing a little bit better or playing a little bit worse, all right, we've got to be supportive of that, rally around that, stay the course, and then finish. And we, you know, there's been some games that we couldn't finish. There's been some games that we did finish in dramatic fashion. I think we have played 60 minutes. I think we can play better over the course of the game, so that maybe it doesn't come down to the last play or the last kick or whatever. But I think there's a balance there between challenging yourself to get better and doing the little things you can to maximize your potential, but also coming to grips with reality that we're probably not a team that's going to show up here this week or any other and just roll our helmets on the field because the Buffalo Bulls are in town and win a game by 3 scores or something. I honestly don't see that happening. So I'm mentally prepared for a lot more games like we've seen the last 4 weeks.
You had another partially blocked punt. You now lead the country in that. You've made very clear to us your thoughts on partially blocked punts, but you lead the country in that category now. How are you juggling those things? Yeah,
that one was sort of okay because it was a very low trajectory rugby punt. And I don't know if we got like a pinky or 2 fingers on it or whatever, but it came out really low. And part of our plan that week was to make sure that we were getting a hand up if we didn't quite get to the block point of the punt. So no, that's part of our plan every week to be aggressive with that unit, and we'll be going up against a unit that's clearly part of their plan. UMass blocked one against Iowa a few weeks ago, and generally comes after all of them, unless maybe they put their defense out there. And even when their defense is out there, they rush pretty hard. So this will be 2 teams that like to block punts. And no, we continue to train it. And I think the big difference between this year and last year is that we've got a few more guys that are a little bit more detailed with the technique and just have the ability to get there. I felt like we were close a number of times last year but couldn't finish. So it's good to see us getting home, and hopefully we've got 1 or 2 more in us here before the year's over.
How's Greer look in his role in the D backfield, and why was he able to collect so many tackles?
Yeah, Greer's Miles, awesome guy. So here's a young man that came out of Northern Virginia. If you looked at him in person, he's not overwhelmingly impressive physically. But when we got to know him, and we had very few transfers, but this was a very targeted guy that we went after in the transfer portal last year, coming out of Shepherd College, which is a Division II program that I have a lot of respect for. Very well coached. They're often in the playoffs. But you just saw, you can almost tell on film when a guy is just a natural football player. Like Paul, you had talked about Sean Dolak a few weeks ago. And just spend 5 minutes around Sean Dolak, and you just knew this guy was just a ball player, and that's why he's making plays for the Rams right now, even though he didn't get drafted. And Greer has a lot of those same attributes. He's very smart. He's got a great football IQ. He's a low-rep guy. We can play him in a lot of different spots, so we play him at safety. We play him at nickel. He's got a significant special teams role for us. And he's just been a great addition. One of our mantras that pops up from time to time is speak softly and carry a big stick, the old Teddy Roosevelt turn of the century quote. And to me, Miles Greer embodies that. You know, he doesn't say a whole lot, but when he does talk, he's earned everybody's respect. And he has really learned what we're doing there on the back end, and he's a guy that can help get us lined up. So very, very pleased with him, and I think he's been a bright spot on our defense this year.
What have been your thoughts, Coach, on Aljay Henderson and just his role in this offense and what you've seen him been able to do consistently for you there?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I give Aljay a lot of credit for a number of different things. One, he's obviously been a very productive player, and I think anytime you listen to one of these other coaches talk about our team and they get asked a question about our offense, it's very likely the first thing that they're going to mention is our running back, Aljay Henderson. And so he's been productive. You know, he's had his share of explosive runs this year and some catches out of the backfield. But we count on him in pass protection, and we count on him in a big way as a leader on our offense, because he not only leads by example, but he's got a very contagious type personality. And so when Aljay's at his best, he can really energize the other people around him. The other thing I will give him credit for is that he has played through some bumps and bruises going back to last year. And, you know, you take a lot of hits at running back, and certainly he takes more hits than anyone else. And so you've got to find a way to still be a productive player, even if you're at 85, 90%. And he has consistently found a way to do that.
Coach, if I can ask you a real quick one.
Of course.
You're a history guy, playing the Minutemen. Who's your favorite American Revolutionary War hero or figure?
Well, and I have to admit that when it comes to wars that our country has participated in, my order of battle would be World War II, World War I, the Civil War, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, probably the War of 1812, and then the American Revolutionary War. So I'm far from an expert when it comes to the Revolutionary War. What I will tell you that some people do not know, growing up on Staten Island, that was actually a British stronghold during the Revolutionary War, and there's still, even though Staten Island has been so overdeveloped and the population's about double from when I grew up, but there are still some houses that were built back during that time that are still standing. They've moved some of them to an area called Richmond Town, where you can see them all in one spot. But I'll throw it out. Let's go with Paul Revere. How about that? Fair enough? But yes, looking forward to going over to Massachusetts. My wife is from Massachusetts. My oldest daughter works in Boston. And we've got a lot of in-laws and people on that side of the family over there. We've got good friends over there. So a lot of respect for UMass as an institution. I have a lot of good friends that have coached there through the years. And I think this staff is doing a nice job, and they're working hard to get that thing turned around. And so we got to find a way to go over there and get a W.
Coach, there's been a lot of blocked field goals and punts in the NFL. Is there like a new special teams revolution? Is there a new wrinkle? Have you been following?
I honestly, other than some Sean Dolak highlights that show up on my phone, and maybe getting an occasional Bills final score, watching the NFL this time of year for me, it just doesn't happen. When we get to December, January, when the NFL playoffs start, I typically get to watch a little bit. But what I can tell you is the NFL, in a lot of ways, on offense, seems to be gravitating a little bit more towards college, where you're seeing some quarterbacks running the ball at times and things like that. But on special teams, there are rules of the game that are still unique to the NFL and unique to college. And so there's definitely some differences, what they're doing with the kickoff and kickoff return game, what they've always done in the punt game with the pro-style punt, and some of the rules there. So it is different. I will say this from an analytical perspective. The quality of the kickers and the punters that you're getting in the NFL is definitely a step up from college. So where they can sort of bank on 3 points, that might be a situation for us where the analytics are saying you're better off going for it, because the chances of getting that first down and potentially leading to 7 points might be greater than getting 3 points. So I think from an analytical perspective, I'm sure when they get their weekly reports and think about how aggressive they need to be in games, it's probably a little bit different, because something that might be a 75% field goal for us might be a 90% field goal for them.
Do you give any thoughts over a player's career to using a guy on special teams who maybe he's a starter here, but he might need to learn that because he'll be in a different type role in the pros?
Everybody in our program participates in special teams to some way, shape, or form, even if it's the quarterbacks being in a couple meetings when we're talking about game situations and hands team and musts on sides and things of that nature. So Sean Dolak, even though we knew he was never coming off the field at linebacker last year, was still a backup on a lot of special teams. He was still going through all those fundamental circuits that we do. And so he was getting the training to do a lot of those things. And I know I've said this here before, special teams, the fundamentals, they're the basis for the entire game of football. And so the way we approach it with our team is that those are directly transferable to what you're doing on offense and defense at every position. So whether you're talking about Sean, who's now a very active special teams player for the Rams, or you're talking about somebody like Red, who's likely going to be a draftable guy from everything that we're hearing. He knows he's going to probably have to be a 4-unit special teams guy next year. And Red started on the punt team right up until a couple weeks ago, where we had to make some decisions to scale back a few guys to try to keep them fresher for defense. But he's certainly very, very capable in that area as well. And we take great pride in that. Sean had, and I think it got whistled dead a couple weeks ago, but he made a tackle on kickoff and got the ball out. And how many times have we seen a member of Joe Bowen's defense do that in the last 2 years? So that was really good to see that the same fundamentals that we're teaching, not only on special teams but on defense, that those things are habit for Sean Dolak and showing up at the next level. We've had scouts here, I think, every single Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday practice this year, whether they're looking at Red or looking at Alj or looking at one of those O linemen or one of those D linemen. We've got a lot of guys, I think, that are at least on somebody's radar, with Red being right at the top of the list.
Okay, just one more real quick. Jalen McNair, does he have to sit the half, or was there any?
No, he's good. He's good. I did send the play in just to kind of see what the coordinator of officials thought. And sometimes when you send a play in, they will come back and they'll be like, Pete, we blew that one. That one's going on the teach tape for this week, but you know, they felt like it was a good call, which I respect. And I do think, I said this after the game, I feel like there's been an effort to sort of scale back the amount of targetings, maybe to be a little bit more sympathetic to these defensive players that, like, if, you know, there's some situations you get in where you're not trying, you know, to injure somebody. So, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, I feel bad for Jalen because he's really tried hard to become a better form tackler. He's having a good year. And, you know, we lost him in the first half, and then we lost Dion to that groin injury. And, you know, you take 2 starters out, even though I think we've got better depth than we had a year ago, but you take 2 starters out and you're playing a pretty explosive offense like Eastern, and, you know, it makes a difference. There's a trickle-down effect to all that. So, but it'll be certainly good to have him back.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Coach.